"I don't love you anymore, we should end this." Those words spoken on a windy October afternoon haunted me for many sleepless nights afterward. Have you ever wondered what's worse, being betrayed, or having the person you loved most tell you to your face that you no longer hold any value to them? I had to endure both at the same time, and I'm here to tell that story. A story not about pain or resentment, but about how I reclaimed control of my life. But to understand this journey, you need to know who I am, how I fell for the wrong person, and why everything fell apart. My name is Lena Carter, 37 years old, a commercial contract lawyer in Denver, Colorado. While I'm not famous in the traditional sense, I've earned a certain level of recognition in the legal field. Because of that, I'm compelled to keep my real identity private. The world is smaller than you think, and no one wants their personal affairs turned into gossip at lawyer conventions or courtroom meetings. The second character in this story is the man I once called my husband, Ethan Brooks, 41 years old, CEO of a high-end restaurant chain stretching from New York to Los Angeles. Ethan was charming, confident, and ambitious, qualities that drew me to him the first time we met at a business networking event. I believed I had found my ideal partner, someone who would understand the demands and pressures of a busy career. But Ethan's ambitions extended far beyond professional success. He always wanted more money, more fame, and women he deemed more worthy than me. We got married over 10 years ago at a time when both of us were reaching the peak of our careers. However, marriage turned out to be nothing like the romantic movies I used to watch. After a few years of stability, Ethan became increasingly distant. Our conversations grew shorter, and his evenings at home became fewer and far between. Instead, there were endless urgent meetings and lengthy business trips. Despite the warning signs, I convinced myself that it was just a rough patch that every couple goes through. I told myself that Ethan was under work stress, and if I were patient, we would overcome it. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. He wasn't just physically absent. He had abandoned me emotionally as well. When I finally decided to uncover the truth, I discovered exactly what I had feared the most. But that discovery was only the beginning of my fight for myself. There was much more to come, and I'll share all of it with you. Ethan Brooks was not someone who easily left clues. He was clever and always knew how to maintain his public image, especially around me. But no matter how smart someone is, they can't hide the small changes in their daily routine forever. I started noticing those changes over a year ago. At first it was broken promises about coming home on time. He would excuse himself with urgent shareholder meetings or surprise inspections of his restaurant branches. His business trips became more frequent and farther away. "I'll be in New York this week, then maybe stop by Dallas before heading back," Ethan would casually inform me. I was accustomed to his hectic schedule, but there was something in his eyes and voice that kept stirring my doubts. Lately, Ethan had been taking more care of his appearance than ever before. He changed his cologne, bought brand new suits, and even started working out regularly. When I joked, "Are you planning to become a model?" he gave a dismissive chuckle and replied, "Don't be silly, Lena. I just want to look more professional in my meetings with clients." Those signs should have been enough to alert me, but perhaps it was love or self-deception that prevented me from facing the truth. I didn't want to believe that the man I had loved wholeheartedly could betray me. Until one Saturday evening, when Ethan said he had to fly to an urgent conference in Chicago. As soon as he walked out the door, I made up my mind. This time, I was going to find out the truth. I started by searching his home office. Ethan was discreet but not perfectly careful. In a locked drawer, I found an old laptop he had used years ago. At first glance, it seemed harmless, but when I powered it on and searched through the saved accounts, I discovered a different Facebook profile. A secret account I had never known about. My breath caught in my throat as I opened the profile. The first thing that appeared was a photo of Ethan with a young woman. The caption read, "Every day feels brighter with my beautiful girl." It made my stomach turn. She had a perfect appearance, a radiant smile, and golden hair that looked like it belonged on a magazine cover. The photos and suggestive messages confirmed my worst fear. Ethan was having an affair. I sat there, paralyzed, my hands trembling as I scrolled through each picture and message. All those times he told me he was busy with work had actually been spent with her. The elaborate lies were hidden under the guise of business trips and client meetings. I felt as though our entire marriage had been a facade. That night I couldn't sleep. Anger and pain consumed me. I had always been a sharp lawyer, someone who could see through deception in every case. Yet here I was, blinded by my own denial in the most personal aspect of my life. The next morning I made a decision. I would no longer sit idly by in this web of lies. It was time for Ethan to face the truth. I was going to show him that no one could manipulate and betray me without consequences. Ethan returned home on Monday morning as if nothing had happened. As he walked through the door, he casually loosened his tie and asked, "Did you make me a cup of coffee?" His voice was light and calm, but to me it was nothing more than a facade. I clenched my fists and steadied myself, determined to keep my composure. "We need to talk," I said coldly, my eyes locking onto his. Ethan froze, his eyes briefly reflecting surprise before shifting to irritation. "What's with the tension? I just got home," he said, sounding annoyed. I took out my phone, opened the photo of him and that woman, and placed it in front of him. "Are you still going to pretend?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly with restrained anger. Ethan stared at the screen for a long moment, then chuckled. A cold, heartless laugh. "Oh, so you've done some digging, huh?" His response hit me like a bucket of ice water. "That's all you have to say? This is how you explain your affair to me?" I asked in disbelief at his indifference. Ethan shrugged, as if it didn't matter. "Listen, Lena, you're being too sensitive. There's nothing serious between me and her. You should focus on your job instead of always acting like a judge, trying to control me," he said, casually. A surge of fury welled up inside me. "Control? Are you kidding me? All those nights you came home late, all those lies about business trips just so you could be with her, and now you want to blame me?" Ethan sighed, his expression shifting to a mix of weariness and contempt. "Honestly, Lena, you're blowing this out of proportion. We're not the same anymore. You're too caught up in your lawyer career to care about me, and besides, you're not as attractive as you used to be." His last words cut through me like a knife. I stood frozen, unable to breathe. "What did you just say?" I repeated in shock. Ethan shrugged again, his tone now cruelly detached. "You heard me. I want a wife who fits me better, someone attractive, someone who knows how to take care of herself, and someone who doesn't obsess over pointless legal cases," he said without a trace of remorse. I fought to keep my voice steady. "You really think cheating is the solution when you're unhappy?" He gave a cold, humorless laugh. "Honestly, yes. And just so you know, I've already made my decision. I'm filing for divorce. I don't want to continue this sham of a marriage. I've hired a lawyer and you should start packing. You need to leave." I stared at him, my heart shattering into pieces. After more than a decade of marriage, this was what I was left with? "You're a coward, Ethan. But don't think for a second that I'll let you walk away without facing the consequences for what you've done." "Consequences?" Ethan laughed loudly. "Lena, you don't stand a chance against me. You'll just embarrass yourself. I've got everything planned out." I didn't respond to his taunt. Deep inside, I silently vowed that Ethan would pay for the pain he had caused. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of my fight to reclaim my autonomy and dignity. Ethan didn't know that I was not someone who could be easily defeated. He would soon learn the hard way. I walked into my home office, my mind still reeling from Ethan's cruel words. He really thought he had the upper hand, but he had forgotten one important thing. I am not someone who can be easily backed into a corner. I am a lawyer, and I would never let anyone trample on my dignity without fighting back. While sorting through some old files, I suddenly remembered a crucial document we had signed before getting married. The prenuptial agreement. At the time, both of us were building our careers and agreed that this contract would protect each of our interests in case things ever went wrong. In particular, the 8th clause was crystal clear. If either party committed adultery, the other would be entitled to half of the business assets. I immediately found the original agreement. When the words, "asset division in the event of infidelity" appeared before me, I almost smiled through my anger. Ethan had been so arrogant, assuming I wouldn't dare to challenge him. He had conveniently forgotten that he himself had agreed to this clause during a legal meeting where I was the one overseeing the details. Over the next few days, I devoted all my time to gathering evidence. Messages, photos from his secret Facebook account, hotel receipts, and even the schedules for his fake business trips were all meticulously saved and documented. As I printed each page, a strange sense of calm washed over me. Ethan wouldn't be able to escape this divorce without consequences. Once my preparation was complete, I arranged a meeting with Ryan Sullivan, Ethan's attorney. We met at a quiet cafe near downtown. Ryan was a well-known family law attorney with years of experience. I knew he probably thought this meeting would be a simple, routine discussion, but he had no idea. I had come fully armed with all the ammunition I needed. Ryan was polite as we began the conversation, smiling warmly. "Miss Carter, Ethan informed me that this would just be an initial discussion to resolve matters amicably." I chuckled softly, my gaze unwavering. "Oh, so he hasn't told you the real reason for this meeting?" I calmly took a thick stack of documents from my bag and placed it on the table in front of him. "You might want to review these before proceeding with any plans for your client." Ryan frowned slightly but opened the file. His expression quickly changed as he scanned the pages, his face paling as he took in the undeniable evidence of the affair. The text messages, hotel receipts, and photos shattered any defense he might have prepared. "Oh my God," he muttered under his breath, clearly shaken. "And that's not all," I said, my voice calm but razor-sharp. "According to the prenuptial agreement, I have the right to claim half of Ethan's business assets due to his infidelity. I'm not going to back down, Mr. Sullivan, so I suggest you reconsider continuing to represent your client." Ryan was speechless for a moment before letting out a sigh. "Ethan never mentioned this agreement. He told me you were just trying to cause trouble without any valid reason." I let out a cold laugh. "Well, I think you now know who's really causing trouble in this case." The meeting ended with a promise from Ryan that he would need to have a talk with Ethan. I knew exactly what that meant. No lawyer wants to represent a dishonest client, especially when facing an experienced attorney like me. Ethan had backed himself into a corner without even realizing it. And this was just the beginning. In the days following the meeting with Ryan Sullivan, everything unfolded exactly as I had anticipated. Ryan quickly withdrew from the case, refusing to continue representing Ethan after seeing the overwhelming evidence and the prenup's stipulations. The news made Ethan furious. He bombarded me with texts and phone calls, none of which I bothered to answer. "Now let's see who's the real joke in this divorce," I thought to myself, feeling both hurt and resolute. At first, Ethan remained arrogant, boasting that he would hire another top lawyer to beat me. But as the weeks passed, I began hearing from colleagues that no one wanted to take his case. Everyone in the legal community knew my reputation and recognized that Ethan had made too many critical errors. One Saturday morning, as I was preparing for a virtual meeting with a client, the doorbell rang repeatedly. I frowned, not expecting anyone at that hour. When I opened the door, I was surprised to find Ethan standing there, looking nothing like the polished man I once knew. He was thinner, his hair disheveled, and his face gaunt with worry. "We need to talk, Lena," he said, his voice trembling. I crossed my arms and stared at him coldly. "I thought we agreed to communicate through our lawyers. Couldn't find anyone willing to take your case?" Ethan lowered his head, clearly uncomfortable. "Lena, you have to understand, this isn't as simple as you think. I know I was wrong. I've ended that relationship. Can we talk like adults?" I raised an eyebrow. "That relationship? You mean your mistress? Interesting. Did she leave you when she found out you weren't rich anymore?" Ethan was silent for a moment, then let out a heavy sigh. "She doesn't matter. What matters is us. We were happy once, weren't we? I know I made mistakes, but everyone makes mistakes, Lena. We can fix this." Those words made me laugh bitterly. "Ethan, do you really think I'm stupid enough to come back to you just because of a few apologies? After everything you've done? Don't be ridiculous." He tried to stay composed, but I could see the desperation in his eyes. "Lena, I'm losing everything. If you take this to court, I'll be completely ruined. Just tell me what you want. I'll do it as long as you don't take half of my business." I stepped closer, looking him straight in the eyes. "Do you remember who wrote that clause into the prenup?" "You did. And now you have to face the consequences. Don't come here begging. I gave you a chance to be honest long ago, but you chose to betray me. We're done." Ethan's face turned pale. He continued pleading, but I no longer felt an ounce of sympathy. "Get out, Ethan, and don't come back," I said firmly, slamming the door shut. Outside, I heard his footsteps retreat quietly. I stood still for a long moment, exhaling deeply. This battle was nearing its end. Ethan had thought he could control me forever, but now he knew the harsh truth. I am the only one who controls my life. The divorce proceedings concluded faster than I had expected. The undeniable evidence and the clear stipulations of the prenuptial agreement left Ethan completely at a disadvantage. In the end, he had no choice but to concede and sign the agreement, granting me half of his business assets. We didn't have to drag the case further into court. I won convincingly, though the victory didn't bring the joy I had once imagined. It was merely the final step in closing a painful chapter of my life. A few weeks later, news of our divorce spread quickly within the business community. Some of Ethan's partners were shocked to learn that he had lost nearly half of his assets to me. His once thriving chain of upscale restaurants was now facing significant financial challenges. Without enough cash flow to maintain his lavish lifestyle, Ethan was forced to sell his sprawling mansion in the Denver suburbs and move into a modest rental apartment in a middle-class neighborhood. The woman he had once praised as his true love was no longer by his side. I heard rumors that she disappeared as soon as she found out Ethan was no longer wealthy. The cold indifference she showed him now was exactly what he had sown when he betrayed me. Karma hit faster than he expected. While Ethan struggled to adjust to his new reality, I focused on rebuilding my own life. The business shares I had acquired provided a stable source of income. I didn't manage the operations directly but hired a professional team to handle that part of the business. This allowed me to concentrate on my legal career and spend more time taking care of myself. One day I received a call from my best friend Emma, whom I hadn't seen throughout the divorce process. "Lena, we should go somewhere to relax this weekend. You've fought so hard, it's time to enjoy the fruits of your victory." Emma's suggestion made me laugh. She was right. I had spent too much time in pain, fighting and weathering the storm of my life. It was time to let myself enjoy life a little. That weekend, we drove up to the mountains in Aspen, rented a small villa, and spent the entire day hiking along beautiful trails, breathing in the fresh air of nature. There, I began to feel a true sense of relief for the first time in months. "Life is so beautiful, Emma. I forgot what it felt like to breathe freely like this," I said, smiling as I watched the stunning sunset before us. Emma nodded in agreement. "And you deserve it. No one has the right to make you suffer anymore, Lena. It's time for you to live for yourself." Her words were like a wake-up call. After that trip, I returned with a new mindset. I decided to buy a new house. Not to flaunt or prove anything to anyone, but to create a space I could truly call home. The new villa was located in a peaceful neighborhood, surrounded by a large garden. I spent time decorating it, selecting each piece of furniture to match my taste, something I had never done while living with Ethan. My life gradually stabilized and flourished beyond my expectations. I continued taking on major legal cases and earned the trust of more clients. The staff at my law firm showed me respect not just for my expertise, but also for the resilience I had demonstrated during the hardest period of my life. One afternoon, while sitting in my office, I received an email from Ethan. The subject line was brief: "Can we talk?" I opened the email and read the apologetic words he had written. Ethan admitted he was wrong and said he wanted to meet to apologize in person, hoping we could remain friends. I chuckled softly and shook my head. Friends? After everything? I didn't respond right away. It wasn't because I wanted revenge or still harbored hatred for him. I simply realized that I no longer needed his apologies. My life had entered a new chapter, and Ethan was no longer a part of it. Instead of replying, I pressed the delete button and closed my laptop. Then I stepped outside to enjoy the gentle afternoon sunlight, feeling lighter and freer than ever before. This journey had not been easy, but I learned valuable lessons from it. No one has the right to control your life but you. And when you stand up for yourself, your strength will command the world's respect. I had weathered the storm and was now living the life I deserved, a life of freedom, success, and hope. The story of Lena Carter is a journey from heartbreak and betrayal to resilience and triumph. After being betrayed and disrespected by her husband, Lena stood up for herself with intelligence and determination. She reclaimed what was rightfully hers and rebuilt her life with success and independence. From loss, she found inner strength and learned to live for herself, no longer allowing anyone to control or hurt her. Her story is a testament that overcoming adversity is the path to true growth and happiness. What do you think of Lena Carter's story? Do you sympathize with her decisions, or do you have a different perspective? Share your thoughts. Don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring stories about life and family. I'm Lillian Moore, 35 years old, currently working as a nurse at a small hospital in the suburbs of Raleigh, North Carolina. My life used to revolve around endless night shifts and the bright smile of my little daughter, Ellie, who had just turned 6. Every time I finished a shift, all I wanted was to get home quickly just to hear her shout, "Mom, today I drew a cat that can play the piano." The small 2-bedroom house I rented was tucked inside a quiet neighborhood. It was simple, but to Ellie and me it was our whole world. On the living room wall hung the messy little drawings she'd brought home from preschool. A family of 3, holding hands under a rainbow. When she taped up her latest drawing, I just smiled softly and turned away quickly. The picture had 3 people, but now it was only the 2 of us who lived it, every day. My husband Brandon and I met back in college. I was studying nursing and he majored in finance. When we got married, Brandon was calm, thoughtful, and always made me feel secure. We used to be the couple everyone admired. But that belonged to the past. About a month ago, Brandon told me his mother, Sylvia, had suddenly fallen ill. "She has heart failure," he said. "The doctor said she needs constant care." I was washing dishes after dinner, my hands soaked in cold water, frozen in place as he spoke. "So, we'll all go visit her. I can request a few days off and Ellie will be thrilled to see her grandma," I said. But Brandon shook his head immediately. "No. She's in a special care phase and the doctor recommends limited contact. She's easily stressed out, you understand, right?" I tightened my grip on the dish towel. "Ellie and I are family too, Brandon. She misses you. So do I." My voice grew small, like it had been drained of strength. Brandon stepped closer, gently placed his hand on my shoulder, but his eyes shifted away. I know, but right now my mom needs me more than anyone. And just like that, he left, with only a small bag and a promise, just a few weeks. The first week, Brandon still called every night, short, awkward calls, but at least they happened. By the second week, the messages started thinning out. By the third, all I got were rushed texts like, super busy, mom's getting worse, or, can't talk today, sorry. I started feeling uneasy. Brandon had never been this distant. He stopped asking about Ellie's schoolwork, stopped sending random photos like he used to. Every afternoon after school, Ellie would ask, when is Daddy coming home, Mom? And all I could do was smile faintly and lie, soon, sweetie, he's just taking care of Grandma. But even I wasn't sure I believed myself anymore. I tried to stay calm, doubling shifts at the hospital, taking care of my daughter, and waiting for the man I once trusted completely. But every night, once Ellie fell asleep, I'd sit quietly on the couch, staring at the phone that no longer lit up. I didn't want to assume the worst, didn't want to doubt the man who once promised he'd never abandon the two of us. But the distance wasn't just physical. It was creeping into my chest, cold, silent, like the early winds of fall. And I started to wonder, was there something Brandon was hiding from me? That feeling grew stronger in the fourth week, when Ellie began waking up in the middle of the night, stumbling into my room, whispering in the dark. Did Daddy forget us, Mom? I held her tight, trying to keep my voice as gentle as possible. No, honey, he's just busy taking care of Grandma. But deep down, I wasn't so sure anymore. I started noticing the small changes I had previously ignored. Brandon used to be a thoughtful father. No matter how busy he was, he always called to say goodnight to Ellie. Now, Ellie relied on old voice recordings, bedtime messages I had saved, because she liked hearing her dad's voice. That Friday, while changing after my shift, I sighed without meaning to. Gwen, an older coworker and longtime friend, looked over at me in the mirror. Still thinking about Brandon? She asked bluntly. I nodded. He's basically vanished. Ellie cries because she misses him and can't even get a call. And me, I don't even know what I'm believing in anymore. Gwen patted my shoulder. Lillian, if it's really just about caregiving, there are 100 ways he could manage it without disappearing like this. A devoted son doesn't need to cut off his wife and child to prove he cares. I stayed silent. Gwen continued. Have you thought about going there yourself? No call, no warning, just show up and see. I hesitated. The idea tightened something in my chest, but it also sparked something I hadn't felt in weeks. Clarity. That night, while Ellie colored in the living room, I sat in front of my laptop and quietly looked up Sylvia's address. She lived in Asheville, just under a 4-hour drive from Raleigh. I jotted it down and glanced at Ellie. She looked up, wide-eyed. Mom, are we going somewhere this weekend? I smiled. Yes, we are. We're going to see Daddy. But it's a surprise, okay? Don't tell him. Ellie squealed, then ran off to grab her newest drawing. I'm going to give this to Daddy so he won't forget us. The next morning, I requested the weekend off, then stopped by the little watch shop near the hospital. I bought the watch Brandon once wanted but didn't buy, wrapped it carefully. Then I picked up cinnamon cookies and jasmine tea, Sylvia's favorites. I tried to make everything feel like a normal family visit, but deep down I knew this wasn't just a visit, this was a trip for the truth. We left at 8 a.m. that Sunday. Ellie sat in the back seat hugging her teddy bear, humming along to the radio. I drove down the long highways, pine trees on both sides beginning to turn color. About 30 minutes outside of Asheville, I slowed down, listening as Ellie told stories from school. I smiled now and then, but my mind kept circling back to Brandon, wondering where he really was, and whether he was caring for his mother or hiding something else. Around midday, Ellie and I turned into the quiet neighborhood where Sylvia lived. White fences, manicured lawns, and American flags on every porch. I remembered the last time I was here. The yard was overgrown, the walkway barely visible through the weeds. But this time, everything was different. The lawn was neatly trimmed, bougainvillea bloomed brightly along the porch, and there was even a child's bike standing perfectly upright under the shade of a tree. A pink bike, with purple ribbons on the handles. Clearly not Ellie's, since we hadn't brought anything with us. I parked a short distance away and turned off the engine. Ellie looked around, eyes sparkling. There's Grandma's house. Mom, can we go in now? I gripped the steering wheel gently, then turned to her. Give me a moment, Ellie. I just want to look around a bit. I stepped out, pulling my coat tight. From a distance, I saw someone step out of the house, a young woman with blonde hair tied neatly, carrying a trash bag. She glanced toward my car, then went back inside and shut the door. A cold feeling ran down my spine. I returned to the car, smiled at Ellie. We're gonna surprise Daddy, sweetheart, but remember, it's a secret. We're not knocking yet. She nodded eagerly, hugging her drawing tight. I'm ready. I wasn't sure if I was, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't live in doubt any longer, and the only way to know the truth was to open that door. I walked with Ellie along the white wooden fence, my hand gently holding her small fingers. The Asheville sky was clear, the sunlight soft and the breeze cool, but inside me a storm was beginning to gather. We were just a few houses away from Sylvia's when a middle-aged woman crossed the street with a curly-haired dog. She looked at me for a second in surprise, then smiled warmly. "Lillian, isn't it?" she asked, shortening the leash. "Oh my, it's been so long, and this must be Ellie?" I paused, then nodded. "Yes? Hello? I'm Joyce, Sylvia's neighbor and close friend for decades," she said, smiling at Ellie kindly. "She's grown so much. I remember when she used to toddle around the yard." I forced a smile, but my heart thudded faster. "I heard Sylvia was dealing with heart issues," I said cautiously, "so we thought we'd visit without warning." Joyce chuckled. "Heart issues? Not at all. Just last week she went to the grocery store with Brandon and that blonde girl, what's her name again? Oh, Lauren. They brought a little boy with them, such a sweet kid. He kept calling Sylvia Grandma the whole time." I stood frozen. Ellie looked up at me, mouth slightly open, but didn't say a word. "You said Brandon went to the store?" I asked again, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sure did. He even helped me carry water bottles from the car," Joyce said with a laugh, not noticing my expression stiffen. "They looked like a real family. It's nice Sylvia has grandkids to keep her company now that she's older." I simply nodded, thanked her, and kept walking with Ellie. Each step felt heavier than the last. Now I understood why Brandon didn't want me to come. Why the texts stopped. Why our daughter had been quietly erased from his life. But I needed to see it with my own eyes. The cream-colored house came into view, the garden carefully maintained, lavender blue flowers blooming evenly in the sun. The front door, slightly ajar. My heart clenched. "Ellie, stay right here with me," I whispered. "We're not knocking yet." She nodded, clutching her drawing of the purple-dressed cat. I stepped closer. From the cracked door, laughter echoed out clearly. "No, Lauren, you're the one who filled the pan with oil." Brandon's voice rang out, light, relaxed, warm, a stark contrast to his "I'm busy" messages. "I know, but your pancakes were amazing," a woman's voice replied, sweet, youthful. I swallowed hard. "Tate, don't spill orange juice on the couch again," Sylvia's voice chimed in, vibrant and full of energy. "I just cleaned that yesterday." A child giggled. "Sorry, Grandma." I gently pulled Ellie closer. "Do you want to see Daddy?" I asked softly. She nodded, eyes wide with wonder. I lifted her, just enough so she could peek through the door. Her face changed immediately. I leaned in. The living room was filled with sunlight. Brandon sat on the couch, his arm wrapped around a pretty blonde woman wearing a sky-blue dress. She leaned her head on his shoulder, smiling brightly. On the rug, a little boy, maybe 5, played with toy cars, humming along to a song from the TV. And Sylvia, the woman I had been worried was bedridden, walked in from the kitchen with a tray of orange juice and cookies, her steps firm, healthier than I'd ever seen her. "Brandon, I really love it here," Lauren laughed. "It's peaceful, cozy, it feels like home." "Because it is home," Brandon replied. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. "And you're my family." "Daddy, play cars with me," the little boy yelled. Brandon laughed. "All right, Tate, I'm coming." It felt like someone had punched me straight in the chest. Ellie clutched my arm. "Mom," her voice trembled. "That man is my dad, but he—" I placed my hand over her mouth. "Shh, not yet, not now." My voice was rough, barely above a whisper. We stepped back, pressing ourselves against the outer wall, breathing heavily. I held my daughter tightly as my mind spun. What was happening? The man I trusted, the man I loved, had been living the past month as someone entirely different, with a different woman, a different child, and an entirely different life. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breath, not because I was weak, but because I needed clarity, to know exactly what I had to do next. And I knew I needed evidence. I held Ellie tightly in my arms, trying to shield her from the reality that had just shattered before us. My heart felt like it was being squeezed, not just because Brandon had betrayed me, but because Ellie, the little girl who still drew pictures of a family of 3 every week, had just witnessed her father calling another child his son. I took a deep breath, looked around, then knelt down and whispered, "Wait here for a moment, sweetie. Mommy has something very important to do." Ellie nodded, her eyes still wet with tears, clinging to the stuffed bear she had brought from home. I stepped back toward the trees near the yard, quietly pulled my phone from my pocket. The screen reflected my face. Pale, but no longer trembling. I switched to video mode, steadied my hand and crept back toward the front door. The door was still ajar. Inside, laughter and conversation flowed easily as if the world was completely at peace, a world where my daughter and I did not exist. I aimed the phone's lens inside. I began recording. Lauren sat beside Brandon on the couch, her head resting on his shoulder. Tate, the boy I now understood was Lauren's child, ran around the coffee table with his toy car. And Sylvia, my mother-in-law, placed a tray of cookies on the table, her voice cheerful, her body full of energy. "Brandon, I'm so glad you finally did the right thing," she said. "Lauren is who you should have chosen from the start. That Lillian girl, I told you so many times." I gripped my phone tighter. Every word was recorded, clearly, fully. Brandon chuckled. "Mom, let's not talk about the past. Everything's almost taken care of." "Almost?" Lauren tilted her head. "Are you sure? I still worry. What if she finds out?" "No way," Brandon replied confidently. "Lillian believes anything. All I have to say is Mom's seriously ill and she listens. She's never questioned me." I bit my lip until I tasted blood just to stop myself from gasping. "What about Ellie?" Lauren asked. "She's still your daughter, right?" Brandon shrugged and grabbed a cookie from the plate. "Lillian will handle her. Ellie's the only one I feel guilty about, but honestly, Tate needs me more. He's part of this life now. And the little girl, she's not important anymore?" Lauren's voice was quiet but pointed. Brandon paused, then exhaled. "I have a new family now, Lauren. Ellie, she'll just have to adjust." I stopped recording. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from fury, from resolve. Brandon hadn't just betrayed me, he'd betrayed our daughter, the same child he once rocked to sleep every night. He'd discarded her like she was just some leftover from a past life. I walked back to the bushes where Ellie sat curled up, her eyes filled with sorrow. Between soft sobs, she asked, "Mom, why did Daddy call that boy his son? What about me?" I knelt and hugged her tightly. "Daddy did something wrong, Ellie, but you didn't. You are the most precious thing in my life." I wiped away her tears, then added, "I'll do everything I can to protect you. From now on, you don't have to try to understand grown-up problems, okay?" She nodded faintly, and I carried her back to the car. In my mind, a plan was forming, not for revenge, but for justice. I had the video. I had the evidence. And I wasn't going to let someone like Brandon erase our existence with a few easy lies. I started the car but didn't drive away right away. I opened my phone and went to my contacts. My finger stopped on a name I never thought I'd need. Joanna Pierce, an attorney I'd once met during a dispute involving a patient at the hospital. A sharp, no-nonsense woman. But fair. I hit call. The phone rang 3 times. "Hello? Hello, Joanna, it's me, Lillian Moore. I need to see you. As soon as possible." My voice was firm, no longer wavering. "I have proof, and I'm ready to fight." After hanging up, I looked at Ellie through the rearview mirror. She was hugging her stuffed bear, eyes distant. I knew. I couldn't afford to hesitate anymore. Because from this point on, I wasn't just a betrayed wife. I was a mother. And I would not let anyone discard my daughter so easily. I left Asheville that very afternoon after making sure the video was backed up to both a hard drive and the cloud. On the way back to Raleigh, Ellie fell asleep in the back seat, still clutching her old stuffed bear. I drove in silence, my thoughts racing, but with razor-sharp clarity. No more tears, only action. The moment I got home, I called Rachel Winwood, Gwen's former colleague, now a family and custody attorney. I had never imagined I'd need her, but today, it wasn't just a need, it was a necessity. Rachel scheduled a meeting for the next morning. Before going to bed, I texted my mom, Elaine Moore, who still lived in Durham, less than an hour's drive from Raleigh. "Mom, I need to leave Ellie with you for a few days. I'll explain when I arrive." Early the next morning, I gently woke Ellie. She was still tired but didn't ask many questions. I drove her to my mother's house. Elaine opened the door with worry already in her eyes the moment she saw me. "What's going on, sweetheart?" I took a deep breath. "I'll tell you everything, but right now I just need you to watch Ellie for a few days. I have something important to take care of." My mom hugged Ellie, whispered something into her ear while I just stood there, clutching the folder and the phone holding the truth we had uncovered. By the time it was not even 8 a.m., I arrived at Rachel's office. A small red brick building in a quiet area near downtown. Rachel, a Jewish woman in her early 40s with short curls and sharp, steady eyes, greeted me with a handshake and led me into a private meeting room. I placed the phone on the table and said, "I need a divorce, and I want full custody of my daughter." Rachel sat silently for 5 full minutes as she watched the video. She didn't say a word until it ended. Then she hit pause, looked up at me. You have everything I need. Visuals, audio, context, timestamps. This isn't just evidence of infidelity. It's concealment, deception, and likely grounds for moral misconduct in a divorce case. The court will lean entirely in your favor. I nodded, my voice raspy. He had the nerve to say Ellie didn't matter anymore. Rachel picked up her phone and called her assistant. Prepare an emergency petition for an irreconcilable divorce. File a request for temporary sole custody with video evidence attached. We'll also request a no-contact order if needed. I looked at her and knew I had chosen the right person. Before I left her office, Rachel gave one last instruction. I need you to do one more thing before we formally proceed. Check your joint bank account. That same afternoon, I went to the bank. It only took a few minutes to log in. And there it was, Brandon was still using the credit card linked to our joint account for purchases, including items for Lauren and that child. I immediately followed Rachel's advice. I withdrew half the money, transferred it into a new account under my and Ellie's name, and locked all outside access through my phone. That evening, I returned to my mother's house and had dinner with her and Ellie. My mom looked at me, and for the first time in years, she saw someone who wasn't lost or hesitant. You've made your decision, she asked. I nodded. Not just for me. For Ellie. I won't let her grow up in a world where people can throw her away like something used. My mom squeezed my hand without saying another word. That night, I lay next to Ellie, listening to her steady breathing, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I was no longer afraid of Brandon. Not afraid of his excuses, his blame, or the fake little family he was trying to build in Asheville. I had lost enough. Now it was time to reclaim what was mine. Through the silence of evidence, through the law, and through the clarity of a mother who would never surrender. 2 days later, I stood in front of the familiar white gate of the house in Asheville, a place that once symbolized my trust, and now would become the end of every last illusion. Next to me stood Rachel Linwood, dressed in a charcoal suit, posture firm, eyes cold but resolute. In her hand was a folder, stamped and ready. Divorce papers, custody petition, financial documents, and the video. The one that captured every word of betrayal. Rachel looked at me and asked quietly, "Ready?" I nodded, voice steady. More than ever. We walked up the stone path, bougainvillea still blooming brightly over the porch, a cruel contrast. Rachel rang the doorbell. A few seconds later, Brandon opened the door. His face froze in total disbelief. "Lillian, what are you doing here?" I looked straight at him, expressionless. "I came to finish what you started." Brandon glanced over my shoulder, then at Rachel. "Who is?" "Rachel Linwood, my attorney," I answered for him. "We need to talk. Now." "It's not a good time. Lauren and Tate are napping and my mom—" "Then wake them," Rachel interrupted, her tone calm but firm. "Because your fantasy life is about to be exposed." I stepped through the door before Brandon could stop me. The living room looked exactly as it did through the crack in the door. Tidy, cozy, complete, but without a place for Ellie. Lauren walked out from the kitchen, coffee mug in hand. Her eyes landed on me, then darted to Brandon in panic. "What is she doing here?" she asked quickly, setting her mug down. I didn't answer. Rachel opened the folder and pulled out several documents. "We're here to serve divorce papers, supported by full evidence of deceit, concealment, and betrayal. This is a copy of the custody petition for full parental rights. And this," she placed a USB drive on the table, "is the recorded footage of exactly what took place in this house 3 days ago." Brandon's face turned pale. At that moment, Sylvia appeared in the hallway, still holding her phone. "What's going on? Why are you here, Lillian?" I turned to her, the woman who used to call me a good daughter-in-law and who had stood by while my family fell apart without saying a word. "You seem well," I said coldly, not exactly what one would expect from someone supposedly too sick to receive visitors. Sylvia froze, then hissed, "I don't owe you an explanation." "No," I replied, "because everything's already been recorded." Lauren turned to Brandon, her voice rising. "You told me she didn't know anything. You said it was final. You said I was your family now." "Lauren, now's not the time." Brandon tried to keep his voice low. "At the time, she just dropped a bomb in the middle of your house, Brandon," she shouted, then looked at me, her voice filled with venom. "You think you can steal him with a stack of paperwork?" I looked her straight in the eyes. "No. I don't need a man who betrays his own child. I came here to protect my daughter. The same daughter he claimed no longer matters." Brandon flinched. "Lillian, I didn't mean it that way." Rachel calmly unlocked her phone and played the recording. Brandon's voice rang out loud and clear from the speaker. "Tate needs me more." I have a new family now, Lauren. Ellie, we'll have to get used to that. The entire room went silent. Brandon took a step back, speechless. I took a deep breath. I didn't come here to beg. I came to say, Ellie and we don't need you anymore. Sylvia suddenly shouted, "Get out of my house!" Rachel turned to her and gave a cold smile. Legally, this house is not solely yours until division of assets is finalized. And, according to the bank records, your son is still using shared marital funds for questionable personal expenses. The court will be very interested in that. Brendan collapsed into the chair, burying his face in his hands. Lauren stormed upstairs, slamming the door so hard the picture frames on the wall shook. I didn't need to say anything more. I simply turned and walked out of that house, with steps steadier than ever before. The sky over Asheville was gray, but inside me, a beam of light was beginning to shine. I had stood up, and I would not look back. 3 months later, on a bright April morning, I stood in my new apartment in the heart of Raleigh, looking out the large window at the park below. A soft breeze rustled the lush green trees, and birds chirped in the distance. Ellie was running around the living room, still faintly smelling of fresh paint, holding a handmade paper flower crown in preparation for her 7.5 birthday party. "I can't wait until the afternoon, Mom," Ellie shouted, hair flying, cheeks flushed with excitement. Quiet joy rose inside me as I adjusted the small board hanging near the kitchen, with hand-lettered words that read, "Happy birthday, Ellie." This 2-bedroom apartment wasn't spacious, but it was cozy and full of light. Most importantly, it was mine. The lease had my name on it, and I cleaned and decorated every corner myself. The divorce had been processed quickly thanks to the undeniable evidence. Rachel had done an excellent job. I was awarded half of the shared assets, full custody of Ellie, and retained insurance benefits for both of us. Soon after, I also received official notice from the hospital. I had been promoted to lead shift coordinator in the emergency department. It was the first professional step I had once believed I'd never reach, while living in the shadow of a successful husband. My mom, Elaine, moved in with us during the early months of the transition. Though always strict, she quietly helped clean, cooked our meals, and read books to Ellie every night, as if making up for all the missed bedtime calls that never came. And Gwen, my coworker and the first to suspect Brandon, had become more like family. She brought dinner every weekend and sometimes brought her 2 grandchildren to play with Ellie. The laughter of children made this apartment feel more alive than it had in years. I didn't talk much about Brandon, but Ellie seemed to understand boundaries. Occasionally she'd ask in a soft voice, "Is Daddy doing okay, Mom?" And I would respond with all the calm I could muster, "I don't know, sweetheart, but I do know you're growing up wonderfully." Our new life wasn't perfect, but it was real. No more empty promises, no more cold dinners with a chair left waiting I once believed was only temporarily unfilled. That afternoon we hosted a small birthday party for Ellie in the apartment's backyard. There was no tiered cake or silk table runners like the parties Brandon used to stage, but there was a cake made by Gwen, mint green balloons, and bursts of laughter from the neighborhood kids. Ellie wore the light blue dress I'd bought from a local craft shop. She ran to me as soon as the birthday song ended. This is the best birthday ever." I hugged her tight. "Because you deserve every bit of happiness, Ellie." Elaine was slicing cake, Gwen was pouring juice, and I simply stood there, quietly watching everyone. And for the first time in a long time, I felt everything was finally on track. In that moment, I glanced beyond the apartment's fence. A familiar car was parked across the street. Brandon was standing beside it. He didn't walk in, he just stood there, quietly, hands in his pockets, watching Ellie from afar. I didn't call Ellie, I didn't approach him, I only looked at him once, just long enough for Brandon to see clearly, my daughter and I no longer belonged to the world he had tried to hide us from. A few minutes later, the car drove off, no one else noticed. But I knew. My closure wasn't just legal, it was a true release from everything I once tried to hold on to. Ellie hugged her teddy bear and whispered in my ear as she blew out her candles. "Mom, you know what? I don't remember last year's birthday, but I'll remember this one forever." My throat tightened with emotion. "Because this year you got to be yourself." And so did I. 10 months after the court officially granted me full custody of Ellie, I happened to hear news about Brandon from an old acquaintance. Not from him, of course, but through a mutual friend's social media post. That friend had once worked at the same insurance company. Brandon had quit his job. In reality, he was terminated after the company discovered he had been using his corporate credit card for personal spending, including weekend getaways with Lauren and her son. The behavior not only damaged his credit record, but also entangled him in an internal lawsuit that lasted over 6 months. I wasn't surprised, just disappointed that the man I once trusted had chosen to lose everything by his own arrogance. Lauren had left just a few months after our confrontation in Asheville. She packed up and left the house with Tate, without leaving a single note. Rumor had it she found out Brandon had secretly been texting a young female colleague. Same old habits, unchanged. Lauren called me one afternoon to clarify a few things, as she put it. The call lasted under 3 minutes, but when we hung up, both she and I understood the only one who had truly lost everything was him. And Sylvia? After suffering a stroke during winter, she was admitted to a long-term care facility in southern Charlotte. Brandon couldn't afford to pay her medical bills on his own, and her insurance was terminated after he lost his job. That burden now sat solely on the shoulders of a man with no family beside him, no stable income, and almost no one left who cared to listen. I wasn't happy to hear it, but I no longer felt guilt either. Every choice comes with a price, and Brandon made the wrong one. Not just once. One afternoon in June, Ellie and I went with Gwen to a local fair in the center of town. I was crouched down helping Ellie choose a beaded bracelet when I felt a gaze from across the square. When I looked up, I saw Brandon standing there, about 30 feet away, hands in his pockets, looking noticeably thinner than before. He didn't come closer, just stood there, silent, still. Ellie didn't notice him, she was too focused on picking out a pink kite. I didn't call her over either, I just looked at Brandon, and in that brief moment there was no hatred. Just the long silence of something that had already ended. Brandon looked at his daughter, his face unable to hide the pain. I knew that look. It wasn't the look of a wounded man. It was the look of someone who knew he had lost the most precious thing he'd ever had. I didn't walk toward him. And I didn't walk away immediately, either. I simply gave Gwen's hand a light squeeze, and together, we left the fair, leaving behind a man standing alone in the crowd, unnoticed by everyone else. That evening, while Ellie sat at the dining table coloring, she looked up and asked, "Mom, can we go to the park tomorrow?" I gave her a soft nod. Of course. But first we're stopping by the new bakery. They have those cinnamon rolls you love. She nodded, eyes lighting up. Then don't forget the orange juice, okay? I walked over, hugged her and kissed her on the forehead. If you wanted the whole world, I'd bring it. We didn't need anyone else, not a forced family, not late apologies. Because together we created something true. And that was enough. Lillian's story isn't just about overcoming betrayal, it's a reminder that women don't have to endure something that's already rotting beneath the surface. From a betrayed wife, she became a strong mother, protecting her daughter and rebuilding her life with her own hands. In reality, we all stumble. What matters most is having the courage to rise, to walk away from what no longer serves us, and to choose ourselves, with pride and true freedom. What do you think about Lillian's choices and the journey she took? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, honest stories about family, life, and the unexpected turns that shape us.